University of Bolton traces its history back to the foundation in 1825 of the Bolton Mechanic Institute, one of the first to be established in the UK. Its primary purpose has always been to provide educational opportunities for those who wish to better their situation and their prospects, which, funnily enough, is exactly one of the main aims of today's Levelling Up agenda. In 2005, the institution formally became a university and has been led by Professor George Holmes, our Vice-Chancellor, for over the past 16 years. The university has around 11,000 full-time and part-time students from across the world, and its teaching intensive research informed, known as TIRI, undergraduate and postgraduate courses are designed to give the best possible student experience. Well everyone, we must be doing something right, as we have been named #1 in the Northwest for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide 2021, and we've been placed first in the Northwest for teaching quality in the Times and the Sunday Times Good University Guide 2021. I am passionate about our students, so much so that I will keep banging on the drum to state that there are as many skilled and talented young people in the North as there are anywhere else in the UK. Needless to say, we must work together to ensure those areas and groups of people are rightly given the opportunities to level up. However, that being said, to achieve such levelling up, we must firstly recognise good health and well-being run parallel, and therefore must also address these issues in order to make this happen. Now more than ever, focusing on health and well-being is particularly apt, as over the last 15 months we have suffered from the global pandemic COVID-19. Over a year ago, we surveyed our students, and they told us very loud and very clear that visiting the campus and having face-to-face teaching is a vital aspect of their university life. And so we were determined to deliver that for them. The University of Bolton was the first in the UK to announce that it would embark on a complete redesign of campus to make it COVID secure and ready for students and our staff in September 2020. A range of innovative measures were introduced which included airport-style temperature scanners at building entrances, a track and trace system, a clearly marked one-way routes, protective screens, a limit to the number of staff and students on campus each day, and finally buying 1,000 bikes free to our students as an option to help them avoid having to travel on public transport. This methodical and detailed approach has enabled Public Health England to allow us to keep our campus open for students when government restrictions allowed. It is so important to stress that since the beginning of the pandemic, the University of Bolton has not had a single outbreak on the campus. We hope that the measures we have taken can be adopted by other institutions and students can benefit around the country and as quickly as possible. Otherwise, there will be a whole generation of students left behind, and COVID-19 will do more to widen existing social divisions and take us backwards in regards to social mobility, much more than anything we have ever seen in our lifetime. We redesigned our campus, which enabled us to offer face-to-face teaching in a COVID-secure way. However, as well as those measures, we also recognise the importance of other support for our students, who have faced an extremely challenging time as they worked hard to continue their studies in a very difficult circumstance. And so we further provided pastoral and financial support, as well as hot meals and food packages for students isolated during the various lockdowns. Now, as the government's roadmap continues on course, staff and students are able to be tested twice a week on campus or take tests away for home testing. We pride ourselves on putting our students and their well-being, both physical and mental, at the heart of everything we do at the University of Bolton. But let's make no mistake, unless we get students safely back on campus, learning and living as normal a university life as soon as possible, we will not be able to level up and increase social mobility. So let's crack on with today's Good Health and Wellbeing webinar. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to all the panel members and the participants attending the webinar today. This is Seema Patan and I'm an MBA student of University of Bolton. And my question to the panel members is, how might we recognize or help in the best possible way to, for example, any of the family member or a friend suffering from this disease, this mental health issue, bearing in mind that this is a very delicate and sensitive subject which many of them might not discuss in open?
Hi, my name is Martin Keddy. I'm currently a student at the University of Bolton. I'm studying an MA in Applied Art and Community Theatre. As social media has become prevalent in everyone's life and this has caused its own stresses through online personal abuse, I would like to ask the panel how we can prevent social media from being so dominant in people's lives and also how they can help with the stresses that come along with social media.
Hi, I'm Chloe Hesketh. I'm in my second year of studying English and Creative Writing at the University of Bolton. Juggling so many responsibilities can be a real challenge. As a student, we have study, work and sometimes caring duties. I'd like to ask the panel, do you have any suggestions for good strategies to ensure a good work-life balance, managing to get done all the things we need to, as well as having time to relax in our lives?
Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of Levelling Up Goals webinars. Today we are going to be talking about health and well-being, how to level up good health and well-being. This webinar is in association with the University of Bolton. In fact, it's a Bolton-tastic webinar because we have lots of guests from the area. Let me introduce my panel to you. Justine Greening, of course, joins us as ever. She's former Secretary of State for Education, Transport and International Development. Seema Kennedy is here again. She's co-chair of the Purpose Coalition, Levelling Up Goals, and a former government minister and former MP for South Ribble. Baroness Newlove is the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Bolton. She also sits in the House of Lords as a Conservative peer and is now also a Deputy Speaker. Professor Patrick McGee is a CBT therapist, psychologist and UK National Teaching Fellow, educated at Glasgow and Oxford. We are also joined by, if I can find my notes properly, Chris Green MP. He's Conservative MP for Bolton West and Atherton. And also Sir Carrie Cooper, who's a world-leading expert on wellbeing and co-chair of the National Forum for Health and Wellbeing at Work. Now, those of you who haven't watched one of these webinars before, these are all about how to level up. We've covered lots of subjects in previous webinars, including education, the role of business, universities in levelling up. Well, today we are going to concentrate on the goal of levelling up in the field of healthcare. And Justine Greening, let me start with you. Would you like to introduce this? Because this is, of course, one of the levelling up goals that you've been so powerful in advocating.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks for getting it going today. So the Levelling Up Goals really set out these distinct challenges we've got to meet as a country if we're really going to deliver levelling up. But Levelling Up Goal 8 is around health and well-being, and it's there because I think we all understand how important health and well-being is to being able to fulfill your potential in life and get on, and almost it doesn't matter how good education is, how great our companies are at being open to that talent. If you yourself are being held back through ill health, then it makes it a lot harder for you to really thrive in your life. We know even before COVID that health inequalities and life chances were almost inextricably linked. There was some amazing, powerful work done by Michael Marmot back in 2010 that really set out how people who have better life chances and more opportunities and can really thrive also seem to lead healthier lives as well. So all of these things do fit together. And of course, we do this seminar at a time as we're looking forward to hopefully emerging from COVID, but COVID has really put even further strain on those health inequality gaps that were already there. And we see regularly in the news reports around particularly how it's affected mental health, both for adults, but also for much younger people and children. And so clearly this issue that was already there on health inequality and how it drives levelling up has become more challenging. But I think it's also so clear cut for us to see that perhaps now is the time when we can really, 10 years on from the Marmot review, really get to grips with this for the first time and really understand that a levelled up country means a healthy country as a precursor.
Well, let's come to each of you briefly and ask you what this levelling up goal means to you. And Seema Kennedy, let's start with you. Access to good healthcare, I suppose, is one of the key areas that we need to explore over the next hour. How does that fit into this levelling up goal?
Well, I think just taking a step back from that and reflecting on what Justine said and really thinking about where are we talking about and where is this conversation based today? It's based in Bolton, like my hometown of Blackburn, really has had, I think, probably the highest rates of COVID and fatalities from COVID. And that we don't know exactly why, but we do know that both areas have had a really high level of health inequalities. So Ian, you're talking about access to healthcare, but most healthcare is in the home. It's in the environments, it's in our parks, it's in how we design our homes and our schools and our cities and our towns. So really we need to be talking about that. How do we, I haven't been to the GP for many, many years because of the air that I breathe, the house that I live in, that I can heat it properly and that I can nourish myself. But other people in other parts of the country have got to. So I think we need to take a really wide lens looking at that. On access to healthcare, it is a challenge, and I think everybody would agree that being able to get a GP's appointment can be really, really tricky, and access to acute services can be difficult. But I think what the pandemic's shown us is that we can be really flexible. Just the fact that we've got loads of people who haven't had I've got a friend who's worked in PR, she's been giving out vaccination. My sister trained as a tax lawyer, she's now running the vaccine centre. All those things are absolutely amazing, and I think they show that healthcare needs to be thought of in the round, and that's why it's wonderful that we've got people on the call who are talking about physical health, mental health, because you can't divide them.
Well, let's look at some of these different aspects of health. So Carrie Cooper, you've written, I read 450 different articles, edited 200 books in this general area. What does levelling up mean to you in the terms of health?
Well, Ian, for me, it's all about health and well-being in the workplace. That's what I'm concerned about. And by the way, the good news is my National Forum for Health and Wellbeing at Work, which I created 3.5 years ago, is made up of HR directors, chief medical officers of some of the top companies in the world, from Microsoft, Shell, BP, goes on and on, UK government's in it. And what we're looking at is how do we increase health and well-being in the workplace? And the good news is, because of what's just happened, the pandemic, the new workplace is going to be quite interesting. It's going to give people more autonomy and control. There's going to be a hybrid model of working, partly from home, partly from a central office. We're going to get employee voice now more than we've ever had before. And HR is really keen on their concept, because I'm president of the CIPD, the professional body. And we talk about good work. How are we going to create the right kind of environment? Pre-COVID, the year before, March 2020, the leading cause of long-term sickness absence in the UK was stress, anxiety, and depression. 57% of all long-term sickness absence was for that. We've had that problem for the last decade prior to this. It's a big issue. And the ONS found during the pandemic, the mental health even rose higher, mental ill health. and it was something like 63%. So we got to do something about this. And the workplace is a great place to start. We can level up. We can get people, employees at all levels now participating, having more autonomy control in a more hybrid working environment where they're going to be better managed. And that's an issue that we have in the UK economy, which is we have managers in the workplace who've been promoted and recruited based on their technical skills, but not their people skills. That's been a problem we've had a long time. And my national forum, and these are HR directors and chief medical officers, have been saying that for 5 years now. And now we need that kind of line manager in the public sector and the private sector to get rid of the mental ill health costs of the workplace, which is dramatic, and to enhance our productivity. We're on the move. And I think we're going to do quite a lot given the reset that's just taken place.
Chris Green is a local MP in Bolton, or one of them. Let's look at the political aspect of this, because if you're to be re-elected, you're in a marginal seat. You want to see evidence of levelling up by the time the next election comes. In the particular field of healthcare, what are you looking to see improve locally so people can legitimately say, well, I can see an improvement in services since 2019?
Thanks, Ian. So specifically on the healthcare side of things, people's health, it's a very slow moving thing. So you'll see very slow changes in terms of people's health. What you can see in the shorter term, and this is where levelling up, I think, follows on naturally from the Northern Powerhouse agenda, is you can see an improvement in infrastructure, you can see an improvement in investment in business, you can see that aspirational side improving for society. And I think that work aspect is absolutely vital to that. So people have more of an opportunity to to aspire in the local community. They don't feel that they have to leave town to do well. That therefore brings up that community as a whole, because people doing well and being successful in that community, I think, advances all. You might have more people who would be school governors participating, raising the standards in terms of local education. I think that ripple effect can happen, but you have to have opportunity locally. And I think something that may hopefully come out of the pandemic is the sense of localism, sense of not having huge long commutes to work, the sense of being able to participate locally. And I think one of the most damaging things over many years, over decades, is people having very busy jobs, very long commutes, and the inability therefore to do any more than just look after the immediate family. They can't participate in the wider community. And I think this is a key thing to actually raise all of our standards in all of our communities.
Let's go to Professor Patrick McGee. In terms of this levelling up goal, what does it mean to you in regards to healthcare?
Well, speaking as a Scot from a working class area of Glasgow, an education gave me everything, along with a very strong community and a great family. I really want to focus on the interconnectedness of all of this. I mean, Kerry's obviously absolutely right in terms of the importance of the workplace. But if you look at the Marmot review of the Marmot review, because 10 years on, Marmot looked to see what had changed. And some of the horrific aspects of things got worse. I mean, some of the things that really hit home are between 2009 and 2018, employer attitudes to hiring someone with a mental health problem actually declined. If you look at some of the structural issues around diet, for a less well-off family, they've got to spend 74% of their disposable income to hit the NHS recommended dietary intakes. But for a well-off family, it's only 5%. And then finally, looking at, talk about place and class working together. If you look at a well-off family in the north of England compared to the south of England, the life expectancy is almost the same. But for a less well-off family in the north of England, the life expectancy is 5 years shorter, and that's getting worse. And it's even worse than that, because when you look at the index of healthy life expectancy, it's not just the number of years that you've got, but you will have fewer healthy years. So it's interconnected. It's linked to place and to social class. There's always more we can do, but I think we've got to make some big decisions and not just try and find the best incremental response to a structural and very chronic set of challenges for this country.
I think all the issues you've raised there, we could go on for about 5 hours talking about how they feed into this levelling up goal. Rounding off this opening gambit, Helen Newlove, how do you look at this whole issue of health in relation to levelling up?
I think all my colleagues have said more or less what I was thinking, but what has me thinking on what the context they're saying is it's about people and not one size fits all in all of this. I think we've got an opportunity now to create something far better that, this is about people skills. It's not just about policy, technology. As the former victims commissioner, for me, it was always about treating people with humanity, decency and respect. And mental health is two words that absolutely is falling at its, the walls are falling down with it. So for me, levelling up is ensuring we look at the vulnerability, we create something that fits that person, not make that person fit something that we create, that mean big government and policies within, because everybody's should have an equal opportunity to success, should have an equal opportunity to access to health needs. And actually we should have no north and south divide, we should be treated as one.
Well, let's just pick up on what you said about mental health there, because we've got a question from a student at the University of Bolton, Seema Pathan, who says, how might we recognise or help in the best way any family members or friends suffering from mental health issues? And I think when we talk about mental health, I talk about it a lot on my radio show. And I think the good thing is we can talk about it now in a way that we didn't 10 years ago. It's a subject that's real. It's not just crept up the political agenda. You've got MPs talking about their own mental health in the House of Commons. You've got celebrities being very open about it. But do we think that in some ways, mental health, going on from that question from Seema, that mental health in some ways is actually not just as important as physical health, but in some ways possibly more important in the levelling up agenda? Seema, would you like to answer your namesake's question?
Yeah, thank you. Because we've got medical professionals on the panel, I don't really want to be able to say which is more important than the other, but I would say they're almost impossible to divide. And I mean, the more we know about, I know there's a lot of conversation now about gut biomes, for example, being able to affect our mental health. And that is something that I, as a professional, that sort of new medical information is being targeted at me, so I can get healthier and healthier and live longer and longer. So I'm 46. That's the average age of a woman, probably in my hometown. They are getting their first serious illness. So I think the problem is the divide is getting bigger, and this is a point that Patrick brought out that was in the 2020 Marmot review. I think that in terms of levelling up, government will have some really difficult decisions to make, particularly about diet, nutrition, about how food is marketed to people, and have to say, yes, people say that these things are nanny state, but actually we really want a healthy workplace, because if we want people to be able to work, they want to be able to be retraining, they want to go in and out of education, they need to be healthy. And it isn't just the mental health problems that were highlighted by Carey. I think it's also musculoskeletal, diabetes. All these things are more prominent in the north than they are in the south. And we've got to be bold about it, working together, businesses, universities like University of Bolton and policymakers, and saying, this is really, really important. We need to have the two things focusing on mental and physical health.
Carrie, would you like to pick up on some of the points that Seema made there?
Yeah, I was just about to. Thank you, Ian. For me, I think we need parity from a political point of view. Theresa May was talking about it when she was prime minister, about ensuring that we had parity in our funds toward mental health. We don't. Less than 10% of the NHS budget is for mental health. It hasn't grown very much at all. What are we doing about that? We've been talking about this for damn years, at least a decade. We need parity between the funds that we put toward physical health and mental health. Incidentally, they're comorbid anyway. So people who have physical problems end up frequently having mental health problems. People who have mental health problems frequently have physical problems. Those two things are important. We don't have enough counselors. We need more counselors, psychotherapists. We don't have enough of it. I must say, though, on a positive note, at least business has got their act together more. which less of a stigma to talk about mental health in the workplace. We also have EAPs, which are called employee assistance programs. Many public sector bodies, private sector bodies have it. Mental health has become very high up the business agenda, rightly so, and they're investing money in it, and well-being is now big time as a board issue, as a strategic issue. But in society at large, we're not putting enough money into mental ill health at all. And people are waiting too long. I can't remember what it is. Is it 16 weeks you can wait up to get treated? That's appalling for a civilized country. So we have to get the politicians off their backside to look at the issue of mental health from that point of view.
Well, it's natural to come to you, Justine, on that. The accusation is that politicians aren't taking mental health as seriously as businesses. And I've certainly seen a lot of evidence of private sector companies really going the extra mile on mental health in the last couple of years, and particularly maybe in the last year. Why is it so difficult for government to make progress?
I think there does need to be investment, but I also think investment needs to change. So I think too often it comes when there's already a problem, and it's an NHS bailout or whatever you want to call it. I think what we all need to recognize is that the smart way to invest in improving health is upfront and upstream, and it's preventative health and it's public health. And that's why the work that Kerry's doing is really important with companies, because companies can be that front line on keeping people healthy in the first place. And I think that's the key mental shift I think we need in policy making, is almost we need to understand that if you're going to deliver levelling up, it is a system fix. But within each of those different areas, you want to get upstream and stop problems before they start. And that isn't just good in terms of better outcomes. Actually, it means that whatever investment you've got, it goes further, because leaving problems to fix when they get big gets really expensive. And so it's about breaking that vicious cycle we've got, I think, on health and well-being, recognizing how important the role of good work is in all of that. And I think we've underestimated that perhaps for too long. And then it's about building the capacity in the NHS, and particularly in community mental health and community public health, to be able to really deliver that preventative agenda. And I think, the work that Kerry's doing matters so much, because it's really getting to the heart of where employers fit into this, and if you like, where they start and stop. And I think one of the things I did at Education with then Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt was really get under the skin of how does that work in the education system? So in other words, for much younger people in our country, I think we're still on a journey on getting that model right, but it doesn't matter how right you get it. You do need the investment to then deliver the scale of that model that comes out of all of that learning and all of those pilots. And I think that's the big step forward we probably need to take. In other words, recognizing that, yes, you do need to invest extra upfront, and there will be a time when that hasn't come through in your core broader NHS budget yet. You just need to stay the course and realize that probably in 10, 15 years, you will start to see far better value for money on mental health investment, because you will have got ahead of the curve, and that will then have had the generational impact.
Patrick, you're an expert in the world of CBT. I imagine a lot of what Justine said there would be music to your ears, and you would probably have been lobbying for huge amounts more investment into this kind of area.
Yeah, I mean, one headline figure is the cost to the UK of poor mental health is about 105 billion, which ironically is the cost of the entire NHS service. It's a huge figure. In terms of the original question, just very quickly, I mean, there's things Kerry's right, the taboo isn't there the way it used to be. But the first thing you can do with a family member is ask them, and also tell them about your mental health. Secondly, you can take part in supporting them if they are going through therapy. You can help them become more active if they can. You can help them learn a new skill. You can help them be more mindful, and you can help them explore aspects of generosity, their values, and compassion. Because when we're suffering from a mental health challenge, the mind almost says, I can't afford those luxuries because it thinks it's under mortal threat, but it isn't. So families can do a lot of work on the practical side, on the human side, the communication side. But the absolutely first thing is to ask them directly, how are you, and ask them again and again to make sure they know the big open channels of communication there.
Helen Newlove, you raised the subject of mental health at the beginning. We had that question from a student. What do you make of what you've heard so far? Is it all about money? Because often, I mean, obviously, everyone would welcome more money being spent on mental health, but is it sometimes the systems that are letting people down as well?
Yeah, I think it's actually both. I think first and foremost, the funding formula needs to be looked at, because this was something I used to challenge government previously about the formula of 3 years of funding or 10, they're not sustainable funding that government accesses to get rid of these problems or help them. So I do think funding is an issue, but it's not always the be all and end all. It is the system. Some systems are very archaic. Some systems don't speak to one another. And also a lot of people where you need psychotherapists and counsellors, when you need to prove that you've got an illness, on welfare, if you've not got the right counsellor or psychotherapist, you've got to start again. And I talk as somebody who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as my girls. And the challenges in that system to having to justify you're not well, but you need help is so important. So to that family, when you say how would you help somebody, it's very difficult, because when you're vulnerable and when you're suffering mental health, your default is actually to say I'm fine, and it's not. It's a very slowly paced conversation, but just knowing you've got that one person there that maybe when the light bulb goes on to say I want to talk does help, but it is at their pace. And culturally, we've got a society that actually, if you look fine, and it's something as a fibromyalgia sufferer as well, it's an invisible illness. An invisible illness is so painful, but to the outsider, you look fine and there's nothing wrong with you. So I just think it's have an easy year, but at the person who's really suffering, let it go at their pace.
Chris Green, in the years that you've been the MP for Bolton, what kind of representations have you received in your constituency mailbag or email bag, I suppose nowadays, in this area of mental health?
It covers a huge broad section. Accessibility to mental health support is still very restricted. It's still difficult for people to get that. For example, the police have to spend a great deal of their time actually supporting people with mental health problems, mental health concerns. So actually the support, there may be funding, there may be money in one form or another, but the right people having the right funding is not always there. But on the other hand, you look at the amount of support, but you also look at the amount of understanding that people have. The advances in understanding mental health has come on leaps and bounds over the years. And yet this advance isn't delivering a better, more mentally healthy society. There are still massive problems. And I think that's one of the key areas. Are we actually spending the money in the right way, in the right places? Are we enabling the right people? Because more people in society have a better understanding now than ever before. And one of the particular areas of concern, I think community groups, community organizations are so positive in so many ways. So if you have a challenging family background, but you're involved in a local football club, you're involved in local scouting movement, then that can be a real source of support that you may not get in the home environment. And those organizations are far better, far more equipped now. But I do have a concern, on the other hand, that with the expectations and people volunteering, it's almost that volunteers have to be semi-professional, and they have to do so many courses, they have to do so many things to enable them to participate. Perhaps we're not having as many people as we would like volunteering, getting involved, and therefore we don't have as many people in the community actually getting involved in clubs and other societies. And that actually holds a lot of people down. It's not that we are preventing people from engaging and being involved because barriers are being placed in their way. It's just there's no opportunities being presented because people find it so difficult to actually get involved themselves.
Do you think that public opinion is actually a real barrier to making the changes in the healthcare system that may be needed to enable levelling up to take place? Because public opinion is very conservative, by which I mean small c conservative. It's often resistant to change. It's like when a radio presenter leaves a radio station, it's up in arms. How could you possibly make this change, even if it's a better one comes in? In the health service, if the government wants to change the structures because they think they need to be modernized, and we all know, or you know, some of you will know as politicians, some of you, a couple of you as practitioners, that often there are howls of protest from the public. Is the public a barrier, Justine?
No, I actually don't think they are. I think the public
slightly
are a big part of how we fix this. I think there is a need for education, and I think, as Chris was saying, completely agree. I think we have gone in leaps and bounds on people's understanding. And I was going to say acceptance, but I don't mean that. What I mean is understanding and acknowledgement of the fact that there are people all over the place with varying mental health conditions, but also, you know, that maybe all of us, that sometime will be facing our challenges, and then other times will be fine. So I think the public are definitely part of the solution. I think what they probably want to see, and often why they have concerns, is they can't always see this overall game plan. And so they get worried that something that they can see that seems to have some positive impact gets taken away, and they're not sure what's coming in its place. And maybe the challenge really is back into a political system that, you know, does seem to kind of change its mind on what to do. And it's why cross-party consensus really around this entire area is crucial, because if you are going to get long-term change, you really need one version of the truth, and that probably is around the different roles that businesses, society, and government plays in the NHS, and then recognizing that you have to get upstream on these problems, and that it does require some investment alongside that. And I think there's one other final point really to make. You know, obviously, Baroness Helen Newlove is involved with Bolton University in terms of how we, if you like, make this work long term. It's getting the public more part of the NHS, in the sense that the NHS needs to be representative of this broader public that it serves. I think role models do matter on all of this if you're going to get societal shifts. And, you know, Bolton's a university that does an amazing job of literally training the healthcare professionals that local community and that local region needs. And I think the key challenge for the NHS is to bring that talent through. And I think it's going to be that diversity of people in the NHS that probably also give that confidence for a broader community to really engage with not just change, but also being prepared to go and access services from a service that they feel is implicitly one that is all about them and their community.
Let's take another question from a University of Bolton student. It's Martin Keddy, who says social media is known to have caused online personal abuse. How can we prevent social media from being so dominant in people's lives, and how they can help with the stresses associated with it? Patrick, I'll come to you on this first, because I imagine this is something that you've dealt with quite a lot.
Yes, indeed, in many different ways. The research points to a major increase in the mental health damage of aspects of social media from around 2010, 2012 onwards, particularly for young women. But when you look below the data, and more recently, the picture is more complex, because a number of groups who are marginalized and individuals who feel they have no community actually welcome social media if it's managed in the right way. At the moment, I think the balance is such that we do need to ask the bigger providers to do more, because they can at scale, and frankly they're the experts in technical aspects of it. But I wouldn't like to demonize social media per se. It's about getting the right kind of social media, using it sparingly, using it wisely, in particular making sure that children develop a much higher degree of social media literacy. This is all interconnected with ideas of gender, ideas of attractiveness, ideas of aspiration, and ideas of comparison. But just to give an example, coming back to Justine's point about the work the University of Bolton does in healthcare training, you know, if you're a young person from Greater Manchester, maybe not coming from the best of family, your highway to achievement and a higher standard of living over your lifetime is through getting a degree in the health services. It's accessible, it's meaningful, and it's sustainable. And some of the best social media groups I've seen are nurses helping each other, student nurses helping each other during COVID and being resilient. So yeah, we've definitely got to be careful about social media. It can be an issue around, compare and despair, but used wisely, used properly, it can also be a vehicle for change, particularly those who maybe feel as though they don't have a voice or recognition in other contexts.
Helen, do you think that maybe one of the big unspoken areas about mental health is the fact that social media doesn't just affect young people, that they tend to get more of the headlines on this, but actually older people are affected by what's happened on social media. Not every older person may be on social media, but the kind of abuse that Martin's talking about there, that can be directed at anyone, can't it? And how do we get maybe older people as well to acknowledge or to talk about the fact that their mental health is suffering in this way as well?
I think the perfect example is Captain Tom on social media, on how good it is a platform for bringing people together of all ages. And I agree with the older generation as such. Some don't like the content, but others, once they get on it, think it's brilliant. I mean, one friend of mine has got his mother on Facebook, and now she's driving him nuts because she's, getting old school friends. And, he said it was the worst thing I ever did for my mother at Christmas. But it's engaged with her mind, school photos or whatever. So, but I do think that it's a world that actually can absolutely bring people who are very vulnerable, bring them into, we see these romances and these frauds for money, huge amounts of money. And I do think we've got to, that isn't a younger generation. We've got an older generation who are very lonely, and we've got these horrible people that absolutely just take every life saving, pretend who they are. And that's where the mental health comes in, as more so because they don't quite understand. It's not like you're paying a bill. They think you can get that money back. Well, in fact, it's other side of the globe. But I think what's really good is when you get the younger generation, especially in schools, teaching, when we could go in care homes, teaching them how to use the iPads. It's a fabulous tool to bring people together, which helps them from loneliness, helps them to understand, if they're like my father had dementia, helps them to understand other things that families can't bring to them. But social media is a tool that should be there for knowledge, should be there for joining us together. But unfortunately, it does have that toxicity within it. But also, and we've got to work together about this. But mental health, just pressing a button, somebody's so vulnerable. We've got to educate people a bit more about their words, their manner, and what they're actually doing to that individual.
And Carrie, this is interesting, isn't it? Because the internet has been a wonderful thing in many ways. Social media has been a wonderful thing in many ways in terms of just basic human contact. Okay, you may not physically be with somebody, but just to connect with somebody. How does someone work out what the right balance is between all of the positive things and then maybe sort of trying to shut out some of the more negative sides?
Well, it's interesting you should say this, because it was interesting in my National Forum for Health and Wellbeing, so 40 global companies, HR directors, chief medical officers, we were looking at issues when we started 3 years ago. What causes people stress at work, mental ill health? Number one, their line manager, your boss. If you got a good EQ'd, emotionally intelligent boss, you're not going to have too many problems, but the majority of them aren't like that. But number two, it surprised me because we brought in experts to come in and help us, and then we took action. And the number two one was emails, and emails within the workplace. So you're emailing somebody sitting, 100 yards away from you or 2 floors up, right? And so companies are now managing that process. In other words, I'm trying to talk about how significant it is eyeball to eyeball communication. There are organizations now, in France, they have the right to disconnect law. The right to disconnect law was passed 2 years ago. That law says no manager can send an email to their subordinates out of office hours. That means at night, at weekends, and while they're on holiday. It's against the law. Incidentally, a British company was the first company fined by that law, £60,000. A British company working in France, oddly enough. Rent-A-Kill Initial was the company that was fined because employees were complaining. The point I'm trying to make is here, and I think like social media, takes you away from, it has good positives, and Helen's talked about the good positives. I agree with her there. But it's about lack of community. Patrick was saying lack of community. He's right. It's a substitute because we don't have community. In the workplace, we have the same thing. We need to build community. And the way you build community is you say, hey, you don't send an email to somebody 4 desks down. You go and talk to the human being. You go 2 floors up and talk to that person. Lots of companies are stopping emails within the same building. In fact, it was Liverpool City Council did that about 5 years ago, said no emails can be sent within the same building. Many companies are doing that now. And I think what we need to do is more eyeball. If we want to improve people's mental well-being, it's about person-to-person contact. And the more we get away from people and do it virtually by social media, by emails, by Zoom call. Well, Zoom calls are fine because at least you can see the people, you can talk to them, and you have some kind of contact, nonverbal. I think it's important to look at these kind of issues. It just surprised me in the National Forum where all these very senior people, C-suite people, were talking about emails damaging people's mental health and their work life outside, because managers were sending emails to people at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon to their subordinates saying, oh, Fred, you don't have to do this till Monday morning, but if you can get to it, Fred being the subordinate, so do they do that? No, they actually get worried about it the whole weekend. So it's quite an interesting thing how technology can be a source of support, but it can also be a major source of stress on people.
So you're making me feel guilty now because I often email my producers at 1 o'clock in the morning because that's when I have some of my best ideas.
Ian,
but
what are you doing?
The thing is, I don't expect them to act on anything, and they know that I don't expect them to act on anything. So what on earth is the problem?
But you know what managers frequently say? Senior guys say to me when I talk about this at meetings, they'll say to me, Carrie, I'll tell you what I do. I send the email, but I say to my colleague, who's the subordinate, I say to them, oh, you don't have to do it till Monday. Oh, yeah. So why send it? Why send it? Why not just put it in your goddamn box and on Monday morning, send it at 9 o'clock? I keep saying that to them and they say, well, I want to get it off my plate. You get it off your plate, but just don't send it on a Friday night.
I think that we could slightly don't want to obsess about this, but I think if somebody regards somebody as a subordinate, and if the subordinate regards their boss as a scary individual, I can absolutely see your point. But I don't work that way. I mean, to my mind, we're a team and we email each other when we have the need to. I can see Chris totally agrees with me here. I'm sure his office staff experiences. But look, this leads neatly into our final question from Chloe Hesketh, who's also at the University of Bolton. She says, many students juggle so many responsibilities, studies, work and sober homes caring duties. Can the panel suggest good strategies to ensure a good work-life balance? Chris, let's come to you on that.
Thanks, Ian. It's always difficult to advise people on their personal lives generally, and especially not with so few details. But I think a key thing, whether it's politics, whether it's business, whether it's...
Hang on a second. Let's personalise it to you, because look, having worked for MPs, having worked with MPs over the years, I know how difficult it is for you personally to have a good work-life balance. And I'm sure you must get hassle from your loved ones saying, oh, for goodness sake, do you have to keep working? How do you manage it?
It can be tricky at times. One of the advantages of being a politician is it often doesn't feel like work, and so that it's almost, I imagine it's a bit like someone with their own company. If it's your company, you've been there for years and years, you've nurtured it, you feel differently when something crops up, whatever the time, whatever the hour, whatever it is, you're always there ready to do it. So in that sense, it's a difficult comparison for someone else if they're an employee in someone else's company. So I think it's broadly the use and abuse of social media and that side of things in the work environment. Well, probably if your manager is using and abusing social media or emails, they're probably doing other things wrong in the work environment as well. Perhaps a little bit of education could come in, but But I think that ability for people actually volunteering to do things or engaging in a more social or university kind of setting, that ability just to say no. Don't always say yes to everything. Take the opportunity to say no. You've got other priorities and feel comfortable with that, because most people respect you for making that decision.
Patrick, again, I imagine this is something that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. People wanting to talk to you about work-life balance. I mean, there's no prescription that you can hand out. What's the general advice, though?
Well, just a couple of quick things. Very often when I'm working with professionals, it's not work-life balance, it's work-work balance, because many professionals have several portfolio activities, and that's understandable, but it's also a hidden risk. The second thing is vertical scheduling. Don't just think about what I'm doing as an MP on Tuesday compared to Wednesday. Think about what you're doing as a partner, as an advisor, consultant at the same time, because that also creeps up on us, the fact that 3 weeks from today, there are 4 things happening more or less at the same time in different domains in my life. And that's often overlooked. The other thing, again, is say no if you can. Let others know ahead of time you might have some struggles. And in some cases, we know that it's not always the volume of activity, it's the degree of control over the activity that can cause these stress. And finally, in some extreme cases, there can be some subclinical psychological issues around perfectionism and procrastination, which very, very quickly take on their own momentum and helps the person lose confidence in their ability to manage time. But generally, keeping track of where you are and where you're going, and be able to separate out the wheat from the chaff.
And Helen, I imagine this is something that you have to contend with as well. You've got a number of roles, a number of things that you do. How do you achieve a work-life balance, or maybe you don't?
I think I'm guilty of 24/7 not stopping. And I have to say, when we went into the pandemic, that was the only time I really had to think I'm going to have a work-life balance. I enjoyed connecting with family members because you're constantly on a train, living in a suitcase, living in hotels and traveling around. And, you know, my daughters finally said, Mum, you need to have some work-life balance here. This is crazy. Yeah. So, yes, I'm very guilty. But now I seem to have got work-life balance. But my problem is I don't say no, because I feel these people come to us for a reason and we can access them doors to open, and I can't say no, but I've got to learn to say that a bit better, because it's the more you do, the more emails are answered, the more you reply. It's a vicious circle, like you say. So hopefully I've got a little bit of balance here, and I dread now packing a suitcase and going back to London on a train, shall we say. So I love going to Bolton and I love doing my other things, but the thought of having now do that treadmill for 11 years does give me a bit of angst inside.
From what you've just said there, you and I are twins. Right, we've got 10 minutes. We've got 10 minutes to go, and I want to try and wrap 2 things together. I want to know how you think COVID has affected levelling up in terms of healthcare. Has it set the whole agenda back maybe some years? And how can we measure success over the next 5 years as to whether a levelling up agenda in the field of health has actually worked? Chris, let's come to you first on this.
Thanks, Ian. I think it's been set back hugely, a really long time. So the waiting list just for hospital appointments, physical mental health, is about 5 million people, 400,000 being waiting for over a year. Mental health wasn't a priority before, and I can't see it being more of a priority in the future when so many of the people in this backlog have cancer, have deadly diseases, one form or another. So I think in that sense, it's going to be very difficult from the NHS perspective and the other.
Sorry to interrupt, but haven't you just fallen into the classic trap of sort of saying, well, having cancer is worse than mental health, because mental health can be a killer condition as well?
Yes, what I'm saying is the National Health Service hadn't previously allocated the money to focus more on mental health. And if they hadn't done it in the past, and there was a kind of arm's reach relationship, the Andrew Lansley reforms, that's more arm's reach. That was decisions within the National Health Service, or a prioritisation to some extent within the National Health Service itself. So post-pandemic, to think that the National Health Service is then going to reprioritize and put more focus on mental health. I just think it's hard to see that's going to happen. And then you look at the end of furlough. The end of furlough probably is going to bring a significant increase in unemployment. Certain organizations, have you seen local community businesses and their business coming to an end during the pandemic? It's not going to be resurrected. You could have someone who's 50, 55 years old. They spent the last 30 years creating their business. All of that business is now online. They cannot get their business back. They cannot build it from scratch. They're probably not going to work again. If they do, it's not going to have anything like the same status it had before. I think the tail of the physical mental health from the pandemic is going to last for years and years, and it's going to be awful.
Well, that's not a very optimistic note to end your contribution on. Carrie, can you see any light at the end of the tunnel?
That depressed the hell out of me, Chris. Let me tell you, thank you very much. No, I disagree with him. I think that this has been a reset for me in the context of work. That's what I'm concerned about. In the context of work, I think it's been a total reset and really leveling up. Number one, people are going to have more autonomy and control because people are going to work the hybrid model much more flexibly than ever. They wanted that pre-COVID. For the last 10 years, we've been hearing from HR, people have been wanting to work partly from home, partly from central office, less of the commute and all that. I think the mental health, I think you're wrong on that, Chris. I think the mental health issue will be really important now. We're going into a recession. Let's not fool around. That's exactly where we're going. As soon as furloughing stops, as soon as government stops supporting companies, as soon as people are feeling job insecure because they're worried about whether they're going to have a job when all the supports are done, we're going to have mental health problems. Incidentally, if you have physical health problems, like take cancer, it's comorbid with mental health. Many cancer patients have mental health problems. No, mental health will, and I think we've seen it because a lot of people have suffered, including kids, during this pandemic. So I think we're going to put more resources into it, think more cleverly about it. The politicians may not, but believe me, we're going to come after you guys and gals and ensure that you do, because mental health is really important. But you know what? I think this reset is going to be good for our economy. It's going to be because we're going to think about what's really important rather than taking for granted all the stuff we took for granted pre-COVID.
Helen.
I have to totally agree with Kerry in what he says. It's, for me, I do think we're talking about it more, we're accessing it a bit more, but I do think we will be successful to a degree, in a sense of now the catalyst is going to start, and actually all the the pharmaceuticals, all the powerful people have actually got to put mean what they say on the tin, because we have got young children in school who are so mentally vulnerable with their lifestyle, with their nutrition, and also we've got parents who have got addictions. We have got to really ensure that now this is the way forward. We've got to be prepared. Government's all got to be prepared. Furlough's going to end. We're going to have a recession. I'm hoping that the government and Boris and I don't have any privy to that. I'm just a backbencher in the House of Lords now, but I didn't have privy to anything. But I think I hope he's got the ducks lined up, because this is going to have a huge resource, for the millennials, but also for Generation Z, for them to come up. Otherwise, the landscape's going to be bland, it's going to be flat, and what's the point of getting out of bed? And we cannot do that. If we're leaders of this country, we've got to put positivity through it, but we've also got to have enough professionals to support people who need that access, and even bosses who own companies who are very loyal to their workers. We've got to look after their mental health. But I have to say, I've seen this flexible working just before COVID, and I was quite concerned, I have to say, in Westminster. Civil servants are slated, but I've seen them actually go to flexible working. They're carrying their office on their backs, so that's also a health aspect, and they're having to get in really early to grab a hot desk because there's not enough desks. So there's not just about the mental health access to professionals, it's about that work environment when they do come in, and having the ability to do the job, which then has an impact again on their mental health.
And Patrick, final word from you.
We know that global national disruption increases the disparity between the less well off and the better off. Taxi drivers and cleaners won't be working from home, but many other professionals will. If you look at the suicide rate in the USA and Iceland after the 2007 financial crash, it reduced. If you look at the corresponding statistics in Greece, Spain, and the UK, who took a more austere approach, for all kinds of reasons, the suicide rate has gone up. In terms of measuring all this, I want to see a halving of the number of days lost from work because of mental health. I want to see the suicide rate of under 25s halved, and I want to see a halving of the number of weeks waiting for young people trying to access mental health services. If we can't measure that, and if we can't improve that, then what on earth are we doing?
Can I just pop in here and just say, every 42 seconds, there is a male suicide across the world. Now that shows you how we've got issues right globally as well as at home. So we have got to now get on a better, healthy path to stop these suicides. It's such a shame.
Well, Justine Greening, let's wrap this up. I think it's really interesting that a lot of the discussion, in fact, the vast majority of the discussion that we've had this afternoon has been on the subject of mental health. What does that tell you?
I think it means that actually fundamentally how we look and approach life is such a big part of whether we're able to make the most of the opportunities that are out there. And actually it is about mental resilience. And I don't think we've probably understood just how important that is for all of us, whoever we are. And it's why mentors matter. It's why having, somebody there to talk to you at school matters, all of that, especially if you don't have it at home. I think these were seen as fluffy things for a very long time, that was somehow almost signs of weakness if people needed them. Actually, they're smart approaches to help people manage themselves through lives that are bound to have ups and downs, and how they cope with all of that. So I think it really, really matters. And I think I agree with Patrick on the measures. I think the ONS is starting to look at personal well-being, and it's starting to look at health inequalities indexes. So we are starting to get the statistics by which we might be able to say we're moving in the right direction. But I'm on the optimistic side. I actually think, yes, there are challenges, but in a weird way, it means it's going to focus our minds, I think, on raising our game to finally deal with them. And I think, as we've heard from Carrie, businesses are really up for this too. And a lot of those we're working with through the Purpose Coalition and Social Mobility Pledge are really putting this center stage for themselves as well. So it really, really matters. And I think if nothing else today, it's shown how healthy economies and strong society needs healthy people. And it really is as simple as that.
Well, thanks to all of you for joining us for this webinar. So Carrie Cooper, Baroness Newlove, Chris Green, Justine Greening, Professor Patrick McGee and Seema Kennedy. If you want to check out any of the other webinars that we've done on the Levelling Up Goals series, you can find them on the same website. So thank you so much to you all, and see you again very soon.